Now, Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, has been excluded as the US President Donald Trump is scheduled to welcome leaders from 5 African countries to Washington next week for discussions about business opportunities. A White House official announced on Wednesday that Trump would host the presidents of Gabon, Guinea, Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania and Senegal for talks and lunch at the White House on the 9th of July. The meeting would focus on commercial opportunities that could benefit both American companies and African partners. Now, the absence of Nigeria from the guest list was particularly notable given that it is Africa's most populous nation with over 200 million people and the continent's biggest economy. The country is also a major oil producer and has significant trade relationships with the United States. Now to discuss some of our top stories, Doug Brooks joins us now via Zoom. Hello, Doug. Good evening from Nigeria. I'm not sure what time it is where you are. Thanks for joining us, and let's pretend I'm not a day late. Happy 4th of July.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And you?
So far, so good.
So how was the 4th of July where you were? How did you celebrate?
Well, this year I'm actually in Dubai for the 4th of July, and my colleagues at work who are from all over the world actually did celebrate it with me, which was nice. But normally in Washington, D.C., I go to my canoe club and we go out on the Potomac River in canoes and watch the fireworks from there. It's always a very pleasant time. It's the middle of summer, of course. It's very warm, so it's nice to have cookouts and get out on the water when you have a chance.
Imagine so. Well, at least your colleagues celebrated on your behalf. Now, given that fireworks injured over 14,000 people last year, what specific safety measures should individuals and actually the government be taking during these celebrations?
Well, in the United States, most of the regulations related to fireworks are actually local. So cities and towns, counties will have their own rules and regulations as to what size of fireworks can be used and so on. There's no real national guidelines on this, unfortunately. It's been going on for, frankly, 250 years almost. So it's unlikely there'll be any significant improvement. We have seen limitations on sort of the larger, more dangerous fireworks, but it's still possible to get around those. And there's very large fireworks available to just about anybody.
Absolutely, and it's so sad that these fatal explosions sort of taint the celebrations. Now, you've heard of reports, and like you've just said, it's been going on for 250 years, massive fireworks that, cause more harm than good. Do you think that the government can enforce any strong enough measures to prevent these tragedies? And if they do, how do you think the populace will receive that?
Well, people love the fireworks. It is a tradition, and as I said, it's not a national issue. I mean, there's locally they do try to control the fireworks and limit the size of them, but it's even with deaths every year and numerous injuries. There's no real drive, I would say, to actually limit the fireworks any more than they already are.
Shouldn't it be a national issue in your opinion, considering that there are deaths and accidents as well?
Yeah, that's right. It's well, it's the way it's been, I guess, and there's a lot of other issues going on these days that are keeping attention elsewhere.
Enough. We have bigger issues. Let's move on from fireworks. Let's talk about Hamas. Now, what does Hamas's demand for a personal guarantee from Donald Trump signal about its trust in the current U.S. administration or the U.S.'s mediation process? Now, again, we've seen Hamas making their war a U.S. issue. What is your opinion on this?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. So Donald Trump does not have the best record in terms of following up or in terms of his truthfulness. I mean, you can look at his tariffs and you see that he changes his mind on the tariffs almost daily. I think Hamas is a little bit desperate at this point. Netanyahu has been quite ruthless in his attacks on Palestine, on the West Bank. And Hamas is looking for some way to work around him, to get around Netanyahu. And I think they think Trump may be the answer to that. I'm not so sure, but it's an interesting way to try it. And I think Trump has been angry at Netanyahu in the past. I think if you remember, he called it for a ceasefire between Israel and Iran that was ignored for at least 24 hours, and Trump was angry about that. But Trump does not control Netanyahu. So I think Hamas can get those guarantees from Trump. I'm not sure how much they'll mean.
Well, we wish them good luck, don't we? Now, with Israel
We do
continuing,
hope for an end to that horrible conflict. Yes.
yes, absolutely. So, with Israel continuing airstrikes, even as ceasefire talks gain momentum, how realistic is a truce in the short term? Do we see this coming to an end anytime soon?
That's a great question, and we certainly hope so. But is this the agreement that's finally going to end this violence? It's killed more than 60,000 people in Gaza. I don't know. It's a terrible situation. I think even many Israelis are calling for an end to the conflict. It's really being driven by Netanyahu and his government at this point, and we'll have to see.
We'll have to see, obviously. So the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has faced strong criticism from aid groups. Why is its role so contentious, and how might it affect future aid delivery?
So it was created apparently specifically for this work in Gaza, this food distribution and so on. It's pretty clear it doesn't have the experience or capability that the UN and many of the NGOs that have worked in that area. It doesn't have that capability to really do the distribution properly, to do it in a way that's fair and that fully addresses the needs of the Gazans. And this use of private security guards and everything, I think it's controversial and it's very strange. And I think it's an attempt by the Israelis to really control the distribution and control what's going on in Gaza in a way that's very harmful. So this NGO is this fake NGO, I guess you'd say, has been condemned by other NGOs and other humanitarian organizations. And it really it's hard to see how long this can go on. There's people being killed almost every day doing the very limited food distribution they're doing. It's being poorly handled, it's poorly managed, and it's very violent.
Okay, now we're going to move on to another topic, which is the incoming meeting that Trump is going to be having with African leaders. Now, Nigeria is notably not on the list of countries to attend this meeting. And personally, I'm aggrieved because we've just heard Richard Mills say that our bilateral trade is raking in billions of dollars. What message does this inclusion from the White House summit send? What should we Nigerians
Yeah,
take
you're
from
right.
this?
It's a little bit shocking, I think, that Nigeria is not included, or South Africa. And the reason Nigeria is not being included has not really been explained by the White House. To be sure, these are much smaller countries they're meeting with. I'm happy they're meeting with any countries, but Trump is actually willing to meet with any African countries at all. That's a pleasant change for Trump. The reason he might be leaving out Nigeria is that he doesn't want to talk to South Africa. Normally, both South Africa and Nigeria would be included in anything Africa related in terms of policy in the United States. But South Africa, of course, Trump has said that they have some sort of white genocide, which is laughable, but that's his sort of claim. And so he can't really bring the South Africans in to talk more about that. And so he doesn't want to bring in Nigeria either, because he has to want to bring, or at least the policy people would want to have both of them in. So yeah, I think it's unfortunate for U.S. policy. It's unfortunate for international trade. It's unfortunate for Nigeria, and it's unfortunate for South Africa too.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully there will be a different meeting and we will be on the list. But like you said, I'm glad he's having talks with any African countries at all. We'll take it. Do you think that Nigeria's absence reflects broader shifts in U.S. foreign policy priorities in Africa under this current administration?
Well, Trump's already scaled back so much. I mean, between essentially shutting down USAID, changing a lot of the policies that we've had for a long time to help support African democracies and African governments. I think it's not going in a good direction. So he's willing to support private businesses and trade. I think that's a good thing. So, let's be happy with what we get at this point. It's not going to be like Biden or the Democrats, but it's something. So let's hope for the best.
We'll always hope for the best. Now, could this exclusion affect Nigeria's bilateral relations with the US or even push it closer to global powers like China or Russia?
Well, your presentation earlier where you talked about the U.S. ambassador, that seemed to be quite positive in terms of encouraging business and so on. But yeah, I think one of the real fallout, one of the real results of this closing of USAID, of rolling back U.S. interest in Africa, is that we are essentially ceding Africa to our rivals, to our political rivals or geopolitical rivals. So yeah, China already has basically been given Africa on a silver platter, if you will. I mean, they've been working here for a long time, for better or worse. And now essentially the US is not really challenging them anymore. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more Chinese influence. Russia is sort of on their back heels because of their everything they're having to do in their war in Ukraine. But they, as we know, they're very influential in those three coup states, and will continue to be, and may work to do the same thing in other states in Africa. It's all very troublesome, and we don't see much pushback from the United States under Trump, and that's a shame.
Okay. I was actually going to ask you next if you think that President Trump's administration cared much about China, like you said, having Africa on a platter, but like you've just answered, you said not really. Well, thank you very much, Doug, for joining.
I think they do care, but I don't think they're doing anything about it, unfortunately.
Well, that just means they don't care as much, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Thank you very much, Doug, for joining us on Arise America. We'll see you next time. Good.